Hello, friends, and welcome to the second episode of my educational series on pulling. And this time, we're talking about lane equilibrium. This is a topic you probably know a little bit about, maybe a good amount about, but we're still going to talk about it. We're going to go really in depth into it, talk probably a bit too much about it, but also I think just the right amount because it's really important to understand in order to get pulls right. If you remember from the last episode, and you should because it was on the quiz, lane equilibrium is one of the objectives of pulling. And so, if you don't understand it, you can very easily mess it up. And that's one of the most common mistakes I see. People identify when they need to pull too late. Like they see 8 creeps pushing and they're like, uh-oh, I gotta pull to fix this. But it's actually too late, and there's a good chance the lane's gonna fix itself actually. You don't know that yet because we haven't talked about it in this video yet, but it's a common mistake. So, we can avoid all that. You don't have to make those mistakes if you can identify we are pushing in the next wave or two. I need to address this now. That will help your pulls go a lot better. So it's really important for us to understand how it works so we can manipulate it the way we want. So let's get into it. So what is lane equilibrium? To put it simply, it's where the creeps are fighting in the lane and whether that balance is moving in either direction. Again, whether you're pushing towards the enemy or if the enemy is pushing towards you. I don't want to use the word pulling, even though it's kind of the opposite of pushing, because pulling in Dota has this larger context of pulling the neutral creeps, which is the whole topic of the series, which put me in a weird spot of like how you describe pushing in either direction. But anyways, let's move on. That's probably a little weird. In the Radiant side, this is where the creeps naturally meet. If there are no body blocking shenanigans, nothing like that, it's right around here. On the Dire, it's right around here. This is what I'm going to call natural equilibrium. If all the creeps die and you're waiting for the next creep wave, they are going to meet here. It's good to know that. On the minimap, if you want to take a look at it here, if you blow it up a little bit, it's here and here. This is the equilibrium points right around on the minimap. You can see it. Now, another way to think about lane equilibrium is that every wave has to kill off the other wave. This is what maintains balance so that they can keep meeting at that natural equilibrium point. If it doesn't happen, then you're going to push in either direction. Now, before we go further into that, I want you guys to approach the rest of this video with this in mind. Lane equilibrium, the factors and elements are always the same, but in every single game, there are going to be unique elements to it. How this lane is going to push because while your carry just won't stop auto-attacking. I don't know, right? The carry won't stop, and he's just shoving the lane in. We have to adapt to that. Or maybe some creep is supposed to attack the neutral, but it's like stuck in pathing, and it's like, this tree? This side of the tree? I don't know which way. And it won't attack. Well, sometimes they follow you for no reason. Well, actually, there's a reason, but like, you know, it feels like there's no reason. And it's like, there's a lot of random things that happen every single game, and you kind of have to gather all of that and make your best guesstimation of how it's going to affect lane equilibrium. So I can't really tell you some secret key to get it right every single game, but I'm going to try to give you all the information that you need to take a look at, and then you're going to have to take your best guess from there. All right, so let me give you a visualization of what I just said earlier. Wave 1, Radiant, must kill Wave 1 of the Dire. Wave 2 must kill Wave 2. So on and so forth, such that the general formula is that Wave X needs to kill Wave X so that the next wave, Wave X plus 1, can kill the next wave, X plus 1. And that is balanced equilibrium. It kind of looks like this. If you want to imagine it in a way like this, I think this helps, actually, because when you look at a minimap, there's only ever like 2 creep waves, and so like sometimes that's all you... Actually, there's more depending on where you're pushed in, but like generally there aren't that many creep waves showing because they kind of kill each other off and die to towers and things like that. But in the grand scheme of things, it looks like this, and you can just keep increasing the numbers as time goes on. Sometimes that doesn't happen, though. Like, they don't just keep killing each other. And it comes down to these 4 factors. Other elements come into play, but I think it just breaks down into these elements again. So these are the factors where if you opened up an empty game, this is like how it decides where the creeps are going to move and stuff. Now, of course, there are 10 players in the game, and they're going to like push and pull and do little things besides the creeps just hitting each other. But at the end of the day, it breaks down into these factors again. A hero auto-attacking affects the health of the creeps. When they get a last hit and kill a creep, it affects the amount of creeps, things like that. So after thinking about it for a long time, these are the 4 factors I wanted to bring to you guys. The amount of creeps is the most obvious factor. So when you have 4 creeps versus 4 creeps, what do you think is going to happen? They tend to kill each other off because they're just about equal, and so lane equilibrium tends to stay still. But if the Dire were to miss one of their melee creeps, well, now you got 4 creeps versus 3 creeps, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to start pushing towards the Dire. Now, in another example, let's say the Radiant is missing their range creep. Guess what? 4 creeps versus 3 creeps, which way do you think you're going to push? It's going to start pushing towards the Radiant. I'd like to point out, though, you'll notice these arrows are not the same, and that's not a typo. This is intentional. Ranged and melee creeps are not equal. They contribute differently to a push, and I'll talk about that later on in this video. But for now, as a general rule, know that when you have more creeps, you will push, but how fast you push and the severity of the push will depend on which creep you're missing, ranged or melee creeps. Next is the health of creeps. So when you had 4 versus 4 and everyone's healthy, it was equal. But what if the melee creep in front has taken a bit of damage? Well, it's gonna be a small push. You know, they're mostly equal. We got 4 creeps versus 4 creeps. Most of us are healthy, but this one guy's a little weaker. So he's gonna die a little sooner, and it's going to, end up pushing because you're gonna end up with 4 creeps versus 3 creeps for a little bit. Now, the more health he's missing, the more it's gonna push because he's gonna die off really quickly, starting that 4 versus 3 sooner. And then, hey, we talked about it one slide ago. 4 creeps versus 3 creeps, we're gonna push. Now, next is order of creeps. So when the ranged creep is in front, he dies off first. We just hinted that the ranged and melee creeps are not equal. So when the ranged creep dies first, you're going to push into the Radiant in this case. Now let's go back to that health of creeps example. So when he's in front, he dies. It starts that 4 versus 3 pretty quickly. But what if he's in the back? Now, depending how they target each other, sometimes it won't matter that much, but usually what this means is that it's not going to push as much because in Dota, it doesn't matter how much health you have unless you're Huskar, your damage output is the same. So this injured melee creep does the same amount of damage as this healthy melee creep. So if he isn't being focused, he's contributing his damage the whole time. And so let's say this guy's targeted, this guy's targeted. We got 4 versus 4. They're all focusing each other. They die, they die. Next, 3 versus 3. This guy dies, this guy dies. Now you're at a 2 versus 2, and now he's going to die pretty quickly, but we killed off 2 creeps. So it's usually not that clean. They rarely all focus one creep, but just know it is different depending on the order of where your injured creeps are. So for example, in this case, I would say you probably end up with like 3 creeps pushing. Like one of them's probably injured a lot, but you end up with 3 creeps pushing forward. In this example down here, I think you probably have like 2 creeps pushing forward. So it does matter on the order of these creeps. The last factor is the timing of creeps. So say you body block, you fissure block, whatever, some kind of shenanigans. 2 creeps go in first. 2 versus 4. Guys, what's going to happen? That's right, it's going to push. Now the other 2 creeps show up. And yeah, these guys probably took a bit of damage fighting these 2 creeps, but not that much damage. So what do you think is going to happen? 4 versus 2 again. We're going to push. Even though it was 4 versus 4. Technically, right? 4 creeps versus 4 creeps. But the timing of creeps really changed the outcome of the battle. Now, depending how long you delay it, so in this case I said, oh, these 4 creeps kill these 2 creeps. Well, maybe these 2 show up while these 2 are still fighting. It's still going to push, but just way less. Because now you're back to the 4-on-4 relatively quickly. So the longer the creeps are delayed, the more likely you're to push. If those 4 creeps kill the first 2, or like any amount, right? Anything that's not a 4-on-4 will eventually push. So like if you start with a 4-on-1, a 4-on-2, a 4-on-3, you're building an advantage this way so that even if it ends up turning into a 4-on-4, you will have some amount of push into the side that showed up with all 4 creeps right at once. Now there is another part of timing of creeps that I want you guys to know though, something that's less obvious. So here's on the minimap, this is where the first wave meets. This is our natural equilibrium we talked about. The creeps always want to push towards natural equilibrium. So anytime you're over here, you're going to push this way. Anytime you're over here, you're going to push this way. This is what makes the safe lane a little safer. It works the other way, but you'll notice there's a tower. So there's not a whole bunch of lane to like be on this side of natural equilibrium. This is typically a safe lane advantage. Now, why does this work? So let's say you're the natural equilibrium's over here, but due to some kind of fissure block, you have 4 creeps here versus 4 creeps here. Why does it push this way? Well, it's because when you have 4 creeps fighting, wave X and wave X, let's say, this is equilibrium, right? Same amount of creeps, all that jazz. But when you factor in the reinforcements coming in and the timing of when they're going to meet, so the 4 creeps come in, wave X plus 1 joins the fight now, when the radiant X plus 1 is over here. Now, some creeps have probably died at this point. It's probably like a 3-on-3 or a 2-on-2 at this point. But you're now at a 6-on-2, guys. Let's go back one more time. What's going to happen? You're going to push. Now, eventually, it'll meet the next wave here. You're going to end up with, like, let's say 6, maybe 5 creeps survive versus 4. Again, what's going to happen? It's going to push. You have more creeps. Even though, in total, this was 8 creeps versus 8 creeps, amount-wise, that was the same, but timing-wise, it ended up very different, where you did not have 4 versus 4 and then 4 versus 4, or even 8 versus 8. You had 4 versus 4, then like 6 versus 2, then like 6 versus 4. You know, it was very different due to the timing of the creeps. So those are the 4 equilibrium factors. If you just leave the creeps to themselves to fight each other, like, it's going to come down to this. Now, what we do as the players in the game, we try to manipulate these 4 factors. So when we pull, we are affecting all of these, right? If we pull all 4 creeps and then get a couple killed, we're now sending a different amount of creeps. We're sending a different health of the creeps, even if they all 4 survive, but they're all a little bit damaged. Or maybe they get out of order. Maybe they are now later to the lane. You see how pulling affected all of these. There are other tools to affect these equilibrium factors, and you can think about that on your own, because this video is about pulling, so that's what we're going to highlight. But when you do a pull, I want you guys to think about these factors. What are you affecting when you do this? Now, this might be a little redundant at this point, but pushing happens when creep wave 2 was supposed to kill creep wave 2. But for whatever reason, that didn't happen, and 2 creeps survive, and they join with the next creep wave, and now you have 6 versus 4. This is now officially pushing the lane. What do we do if we want to reset that? So this is where pulling comes into play. So let's say creep wave 2 ends up meeting with creep wave 3, and now we're going to be pushing into the dire. Now, if we don't do anything, it's going to keep happening, and it's going to end up like rubber banding back and forth. So what we can do with the pull is to grab creep wave 4 into the neutral camp. So this is where we do our pulls, and that means the dire creep wave 4, they're going to go join in, and although some creeps have died at this point, you know, it'll kind of work out where, again, it's hard to give you guys like an official rule of how many creeps are going to be there, but roughly your wave 2 and 3 will hopefully kill wave 3 and 4. Then your creep wave 4 will die to the neutrals. That means when we get to creep wave 5, they're going to meet back at equilibrium. So they're going to meet here again. And over here, this is where these creeps are probably going to be fighting, right? Because you were here, so like you're here at creep wave 1, creep wave 2, starts to push, creep wave 2 and 3 end up fighting here, you do the pull, and then creep wave 5 will meet here again. So I hope this example helps you to predict the future a little bit more. Because going back to that problem I mentioned at the start of the video, it's around here when you see like 2 creeps building up that you need to go, we're going to push. Like this whole thing should be playing out in your head. And you have to know, I need to be ready to go do a pull once I see these 1 or 2 creeps building up. What a lot of people end up doing, though, is like you get to around here, you got like 7 creeps building up, and they're like, oh, this is bad. We're pushed up. Like at this point, you're like way up here, right? And you're like, uh-oh, we're pushing. I got to go do a pull. But then it takes a long time to get here. They miss, and they're like, panicking. But like way back here, when I see 2 creeps survive and they're starting to move up, I'm like, oh, I gotta be ready to do this pull over here. So being able to see all these play out really helps. Now, I should clarify, this is one example. Please do not latch on to this. This is a single example where you start at equilibrium, we see a push develop, and we address it with a pull, and we're back to equilibrium. Going back to those 4 base equilibrium factors we talked about, there's an infinite number of combinations that you could do to affect those 4 factors with a pull, depending on like hero-specific things, to address equilibrium. This example's not even possible, actually, now that I look at it. You can't have a stacked camp ready for wave 4. It's not... Earthshaker could do it, actually, I think. See, you're only limited to your creativity. There's so many different ways pulling can help you control equilibrium if you think back to those 4 base factors. So, it's not practical, guys. Don't try to do this as Earthshaker. It's dumb. But it's possible, I think, but dumb. So please don't latch on to this single example. We're going to cover more examples in the future. Many of us end up playing Dota by feel. So I recognize that, and I want to give you guys a couple other general rules to help make that process a little easier. Think of melee creeps as having high health and low damage. Range creeps are the opposite. They have low health and high damage. What does that actually mean? It means the more melee creeps there are in a lane, the longer it will take to reach the end conclusion. So if all the creeps are supposed to kill each other off, that'll happen. It'll just take a while. If you're eventually supposed to push in one direction, it'll happen. It'll just take a while. And it's because they're just tanky and they don't do that much damage to kill the creeps off to reach that end conclusion. Ranged creeps are the other side of it. They die really quickly because they're low health, but they attack and they have a good amount of damage. So whatever the end conclusion is supposed to be, they'll reach it. If they're all supposed to kill each other and there's like 4 range creeps, they'll kill each other real quick. If they're eventually supposed to push and there's like 3 range creeps, they're going to push pretty quickly because they're going to kill creeps really quickly. If we go back to our example earlier, right here, these are not the same. We said that. These 3 creeps will eventually die. You will push, but they'll probably kill 1.5-ish creeps. Like this guy's probably going to take probably about half his health. So eventually they will push, but, 2.5 creeps remaining. In this wave, you've got 3 melee creeps. They'll probably kill 1 creep, depending on how they focus fire. They'll probably kill 1 creep and do a little bit of damage to the other one. If they all end up in a 1-on-1, then there's a good chance they don't kill any creeps, but every creep takes like a bit of damage. And it's going to take a bit because you have to go through the health of 3 melee creeps. So it's going to take longer to push this one, but your creeps are going to be healthier because there's no range creep doing damage to you. And this one, you're going to get through this faster, but you're going to take more damage. When it comes to siege creeps, you can think of them as having very high health because they do have more health, but also they have a structure armor type, so they take less damage, if you remember damage types from the last video. And they do very low damage. Not because their damage is like particularly bad, but because their base attack time is really bad. So when it comes to estimating how equilibrium will play out with creeps, for siege creeps, you can kind of ignore them. This is because they'll never tank. They're the lowest priority, so your creeps will never focus on the siege creep. And because they don't do that much damage, and because siege creeps spawn at the same time, usually they're both they're like in the wave at the same time. Like, they're both contributing the same low amount of damage, so you can kind of ignore them. The thing I want to point out about siege creeps is how you can make use of this very high health. We're jumping ahead a little bit, but also kind of not because we explained it in the last video. In terms of attack priority, when lane creeps are fighting each other, it's pretty much impossible to do a pull because they prioritize attacking the other lane creeps that are right next to them. This means when you want to do a pull, you have a limited window, specifically in the hard camp. You have a limited window where your lane creeps have to kill the enemy creeps, and just as that happens, you have to pull the neutral camp into the wave, and then they will aggro to it and go fight. If the enemy creeps are still alive, they'll just ignore the neutral camp walks back, they kill the creeps, they walk forward, you've missed your chance to pull. Siege creep is not the same. When the siege creep is the last thing there, your creeps will then fight that siege creep. And they'll take a long time to kill that siege creep because it has high health. This gives you a long window of opportunity to hit the hard camp, pull it into your creep wave, and then your creeps will prioritize the neutral camp over the enemy siege creep, and then they'll go, you successfully pulled, way to go. So yeah, that's what I want to highlight about the siege creep. Another general rule you should know is that it's typically easier to balance the lane when there are more enemy creeps. No matter what you want to do. If you want it to push to you, great, it's already doing it. If you want to balance it out, you can do that. If you want to push, you can do that. Why? Well, for these reasons I wrote right here. When it comes to what you can do to ally creeps, you can attack them only after they fall below 50% HP. This is the denying mechanic, but you cannot attack them if they are 51% or higher. Well, technically 50.1% or higher. You could also body block them, but it's only temporary. They will eventually move forward, so you can only body block them for so long. The enemy creeps, on the other hand, you can attack at any time you want. Full health, whatever. Bang! Shoot them. If you want, for example, you want to keep them outside your tower, you can run them around infinitely. Because if they're aggroed to you, they are aggroed to you. And I'm sure many of us have had that experience where we're like running through the jungle and you're like, what the heck is this creep wave following me for? They are on to you. And they will not leave until like you disappear out of their range. So you can run them in circles as long as you want. You can also hit them with spells. So there are very few spells that can affect ally creeps to the point where we can pretty much say that is a extreme exception. You can just, whatever, too many enemy creeps, pew, dual breath, whatever, like shrapnel, any AoE spell, any single target spell, any kind of spell, you can hit the enemy, well, not any spell, but a lot of spells, you can hit the enemy creeps, do damage, and help to balance out the wave. In other words, to summarize that, you have a lot more options to control enemy creeps rather than your own creeps. So when it comes to balancing the wave, it's always easier, almost always. Let's say almost always, just to be like safe. I don't want you guys to be like, Zach, what about this niche case? Almost always easier to balance a lane when there are more enemy creeps. So this is where we are so far. These are our equilibrium factors, and these are the things we just talked about. You're going to have to look at the wave and kind of connect all of this and see 3 creeps against 4 creeps, but those 4 creeps are missing a bit of health, and also the ranged creeps out in front, and I delayed. Oh, I actually have a 4th creep, but he's coming in late. What do we have here? You got to like pull all this together and make the judgment pretty quickly. This is why it's useful to do and what we do in replay analyses. And if you ever watch your own, it's something you can do. You can look at a creep wave and decide, I think it'll push this way for all of these reasons. When you're playing, it's tough to do that. And so you are just going to have to look at it and be like, kind of pushing in like 4 seconds roughly? I don't know. This is something that just builds up from playing the game a lot, watching a lot of Dota, watching these kind of educational videos, things like that. And if you can't do it at the start, like you're a new player, or like this is the first time you've really tried to think about this, don't feel like, oh, it takes me a while to figure it out. Of course it does. This is complicated stuff. Do you see how much we've done and probably how much longer the video is below in the time bar? There's a lot to this. So take your best bet, and the more you play, the easier this will become. It's time to talk about towers, because towers do a lot of damage to creeps. Now, even though they're stationary, the creeps move, and the creeps can walk under the tower, and this destroys equilibrium. And I want you guys to be able to see this. So here we go. We're going to visualize it, and I'm sure you can see this because it's probably happened a lot in your games. This is probably the biggest mistake I see in regards to pulling. So someone decides they want to pull wave 3, even though it was kind of equal. What happens? The tower fights wave 3, because wave 3, they meet no creeps, they walk under the tower. Who do you think wins this fight, the tower or wave 3? Tower wins. Uh-oh, a single small camp isn't enough to kill creep wave 3. So you end up with something like this. Whatever the creep wave is, let's say two survive. They rejoin the next creep wave. Now you're at creep wave X and creep wave X plus 1. Who do you think wins this, guys? 6 creeps versus 4 creeps? We're going to push. And so you end up here. Creep wave 3 rejoins creep wave 4. They fight. They kill creep wave 4. Now we're building up a lot of creeps because they didn't take too much damage. Maybe 1 creep died, but you had 2 range creeps. You had a lot of creeps. You killed it. You're snowballing now. You're really pushing in. What do you think could still balance this out? How does this many creeps balance out this many creeps? The tower. The enemy tower. It does a lot of damage. It will kill off these creeps over time. Now, the question is how long it will take. So, for example, is this enough creeps to kill off wave 6 while under the tower? This probably is. Depending when they meet, I would say this is enough creeps if they're healthy enough. And in that case, I need to kill off creep wave 6 to balance my wave. But what if it's not? What if there are less creeps here and they all die to the tower before creep 6 even spawns? Well then, we just let things go normally. Wave 6 and wave 6 will meet at our natural equilibrium point again. The follow-up mistake is that many people panic. They see this pushing into the tower and they're like, I gotta pull the wave back. They pull wave 6. Do you know what happens? It's this right here. We start back up here. This wave 3 is now wave 6. Someone pulls wave 6 into the next small camp. Uh-oh, wave 6 doesn't die to the small camp. They join wave 7. It pushes into the tower. Repeat. And it's just a cycle. And they just keep pushing in instead of like, relax. Wave 6 was gonna meet wave 6. It's okay. We're back to normal. This is why it's so important to be able to see all of this and have a quick, rough estimation of like, is this enough creeps? Will they die to the tower before the next creep wave's there? Are they going to like partially kill creep wave 6 and delay creep wave 6 timing into the lane? Are they going to completely kill wave 6? Like, what do I need to do or not do to my wave 6? Should I be pulling? Should I not be pulling? I don't know. This is the hard part about pulling, is predicting all of this. And most bad pulls are a result of not being able to see this play out, and you just keep doing... You just attempt to pull without understanding what's going to happen. But not you guys, not after watching all of this. I've been talking a lot about, here are the tools you have to control equilibrium. Here's how you predict equilibrium, blah, blah, blah. And a question I haven't quite really covered and that you probably have is, well, what is good or bad equilibrium? Like, what am I aiming to do with all these tools? And I'm sorry to say that I don't really have a clear answer to you. It really changes every single game depending on what heroes are there and how's the game being played. Maybe one of the players is bad and you can abuse that with some stuff. Then what is good equilibrium changes. So you kind of have to make your best guess at this, because it goes a bit outside the scope of this series. Right now we're trying to cover all the pulling, the tools and stuff like that. Matchup knowledge is maybe a future topic. So take what you know about the game and make your best guess. Define what you think is good equilibrium, and then hopefully you now have the tools to achieve that. If you think good equilibrium is right outside your tower, you can go for it. If you think, oh, I need to push right here, in this particular case, I want to push, you can do that. Oh, in this particular case, I want to pull it under my tower, and then I want to balance it again. You hopefully have the tools to do that. Maybe not yet, after the whole series you will. Hopefully. But a general rule for now is that when you're playing pub games, you want to get more gold and XP than the enemy. Actually, that's always true. That's just fact. But the pub part is that almost every carry wants equilibrium to stay near their tower. That's generally true, like, to be good. So, like, it's a safe bet. It won't always be true. There are times where it's good to push or to pull it under tower. Carries, like, come on, learn that. It's not my fault. You don't know what you need. But if you're not sure what they need, then just try to keep equilibrium near their tower. And try to communicate. If you think they need something else besides, like, this golden general rule, then, like, ask them, like, I think we should pull this wave under tower. Like, are you okay with that? Because, yeah, you know pub carries. Ping, ping, ping. My support ruined this game. But thankfully, Overwatch will protect you now. Well, maybe they won't, because maybe you're getting watched by a carry player, and they're like, oh, yeah, that support ruined it. So take this as a good general rule. Try to keep the equilibrium near your tower. And honestly, I hate to assign, like, it's kind of an arbitrary number, but I feel like 70% maybe. No, it's tough, guys. Look, it's just good to aim for. If you have no idea, just go for that. As you learn more and you want to take educated guesses at, like, I think it's good to push out more, then go for it. But for now, just aim for that until you know better. To summarize all of that into 3 pictures, When you have less creeps than the enemy, that's generally good. And if you have more creeps than the enemy, that's generally bad. And if you have equal creeps, it depends. It's generally good, but it could be bad. But it could be good. Because, like we said, if it's right outside your tower, 4 creeps versus 4 creeps, that's equilibrium in a safe spot. Great. If it's out front of their tower, I don't know why I said it like that, but if they're in front of their tower, that's kind of bad. But we said it's going to push back towards us, so, it's kind of good. Unless they do something to manipulate it, then, it's kind of bad. It's kind of tough. So, yeah, rough estimation on what good or bad is. You want less creeps than the enemy. It's easier to control that way. Usually, Dota's hard, guys. That's going to be it for this video, guys. No quiz this time, but a little bit of homework. We went through a lot of theoretical scenarios, but let's see some real ones. So, if you want to be in the next video, which isn't 201, it's like a secondary part of this video, we are going to look at real case examples of pulls. So send in a match ID, leave a comment, match ID, whoever you're playing, and then what time it is, please. Save me a little bit of time so I don't have to look through it. Good or bad pulls. We need to see all of them. We're going to case study it. I'm going to explain to you guys, here's what we're looking for. Like, this is why this pull is good. This is why it's bad. Here's, like, the lane equilibrium. We can predict all of that. We are jumping ahead a little bit because we haven't quite covered, like, more into pulling, but this will be heavily focused in just breaking down lane equilibrium and how it's affected. So if you want to be in that, leave a comment. Add it in. That's your homework. You thought, of course there's a quiz. All right, black ink only. Fill them out. It's good to do. And then you can leave after that. Thanks for watching. Bye.